In December 1944, Europe groaned under the weight of a relentless winter in the dense forests of the Ardennes. Snow was not the only pall that lay heavy. There, as the fury of the Battle of the Bulge consumed the land in a desperate clash between the Allies and the German Wehrmacht, an even more insidious threat loomed overhead. It was not just the frozen trenches and the relentless advance of the Panzer tanks that would dictate the fate of this crucial confrontation. High above, a theater of war unseen by most soldiers was unfolding, a silent duel that, ironically, would echo with far greater power in the final outcome, amidst a scenario of uncertainty and imminent danger, where each day was a fight for survival. A new protagonist took flight, a sleek, powerful war machine, forged with the promise of reversing the balance of air power, a name that would become synonymous with freedom in the skies of Europe. The P-51 Mustang. More than just an aircraft, it embodied the ingenuity, speed, and lethality needed to face a determined and experienced enemy, prepared to be immersed in history. Discover how this legendary fighter not only participated in one of the greatest offensives of the Second World War, but shaped it in an exemplary manner, protecting the skies and, consequently, influencing the course of history itself. The narrative that follows reveals the behind-the-scenes of this battle, as well as the strategic application of the P-51, where the roar of the engines and the crack of the machine guns echoed like a harbinger of the end of an era. In December 1944, the European theater of war seemed to be heading inevitably towards a collapse of the Third Reich. After the Normandy landings and the Allied advances in France, Nazi Germany, although still lethal, found itself in a defensive position. However, the German leadership, desperate to turn the tide of the war on the Western Front, planned a final and audacious offensive, Operation Walk am Rhein, which would become known as the Battle of the Bulge. The strategic objective was ambitious: to break through the Allied lines in the Ardennes, a mountainous and densely forested region considered relatively calm, and advance to Antwerp, a crucial port for the supply of the Allied forces. It was believed that success in this endeavor could divide the Allied armies, forcing them to negotiate an armistice favorable to Germany. For this operation, some 25 German divisions, totaling approximately 150,000 men, were mobilized in secret, taking advantage of the relative tactical surprise and the concentration of forces at a specific point on the front. The weather played a critical role in the early stages of the battle. An unusually severe cold snap brought with it intense snowstorms and dense fog that blanketed the region. This adverse weather condition, while hampering the German advance, had an even more significant impact on Allied air capabilities. Airstrips were rendered unusable, and poor visibility prevented Allied fighters and bombers from taking off to provide reconnaissance, tactical support for ground troops, or even to intercept advancing German columns. For nearly 3 crucial days, the American troops, many of them young and inexperienced, manning a sector considered secondary to the front, were confronted by the full fury of the German offensive without any aerial protection or information. Isolated, vulnerable, and facing superior numbers in armor, the Allied soldiers found themselves in a desperate situation. The absence of the eyes and arms of the Allied Air Force created a window of opportunity for Germany, turning the adverse scenario into a temporary strategic advantage and foreshadowing potential disaster for the Allies. As the German ground offensive gathered momentum, fueled by surprise and initial numerical superiority in some sectors, the deafening sound of cannon fire and the roar of Panzer tank engines echoed across the once silent Ardennes forests. For the entrenched Allied soldiers, the situation was deteriorating rapidly, with lines of communication weakened and the flow of supplies cut off in many places. The absence of promised air support, a comforting constant in previous battles, made their vulnerability even more palpable. In this vacuum of Allied air power, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, found an unexpected opportunity. Although its overall capabilities were significantly reduced compared to earlier years of the war, the dense weather cover offered a natural shield against Allied air raids. Taking advantage of this window of opportunity, German fighters, particularly the agile Focke-Wulf FW-190 and the classic Messerschmitt Bf-109, began to appear in the skies previously dominated by USAF and RAF aircraft. These German fighters, although outnumbered, pose a real and immediate threat to Allied ground troops, who found themselves exposed to low-level attacks, bombing and strafing. The Luftwaffe also sought to intercept isolated Allied aircraft attempting to break through the weather blockade to deliver supplies or conduct reconnaissance missions. This brief rise of the Luftwaffe in the skies of the Battle of the Bulge intensified the nightmare for Allied soldiers on the ground, who now faced not only the relentless pressure of German armor and infantry, but also the constant threat from above. However, this fleeting German aerial advantage was about to be drastically challenged by a force that embodied the very idea of supremacy in the skies. December 21st, 1944, marked a crucial turning point in the Battle of the Bulge. After days of adverse weather conditions that had paralyzed Allied aviation, the sky over the Ardennes began to clear. The thick clouds gradually dissipated, revealing a clear, blue winter sky. This sudden change in weather represented more than a visual relief. It opened a vital window of opportunity for the Allied forces, especially their powerful air force. With improved visibility, Allied air bases, previously isolated by snow and fog, were finally able to operate at full capacity. And then, like a harbinger of hope for the exhausted troops on the ground, they began to arrive. The North American P-51 Mustangs. These long-range fighter aircraft, their Packard Merlin engines roaring in unison, streaked across the skies of Belgium and advanced over the battlefield like a veritable winged armada. The arrival of the Mustangs was not just a matter of numbers, represented a fundamental qualitative shift in the balance of air power, with its exceptional speed, maneuverability, and, crucially, its range, which allowed it to escort bombers deep into Germany. The P-51 had already proven itself to be a formidable adversary for the Luftwaffe. Now, freed from the constraints of the weather, the Mustang squadrons could finally assert their superiority. That unmistakable roar that echoed over the Ardennes was not just the sound of powerful engines. It was a harbinger of the reestablishment of Allied air supremacy, a sign that the skies, temporarily surrendered to the Luftwaffe, would once again belong to the guardian angels of the ground troops. Air superiority, until then a distant mirage, now took on clear contours, personified in the speed, firepower, and determination of the P-51 Mustang pilots. With the skies finally clearing, the P-51 Mustang was able to fully demonstrate its potential as one of the most effective combat aircraft of World War II. Equipped with 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, each capable of firing over 850 rounds per minute, the Mustang possessed devastating firepower against both air and ground targets. Its operational range of over 1,000 miles was equally crucial, allowing it not only to escort Allied bombers on missions deep into enemy territory, but also patrol large areas of the battlefield, a vital feature in the fluid dynamics of the Battle of the Bulge. Immediately after the clouds cleared, the Mustangs and other Allied fighters began a series of coordinated attacks. In low-flying flights, the P-51's .50 machine guns proved extremely effective against German supply convoys, lightly armored vehicles, and exposed artillery positions, causing significant disruptions to the enemy's logistical flow and firepower. This ground attack capability, while not the P-51's primary role as a fighter escort, added an extra layer of pressure to German forces already overwhelmed by Allied ground resistance. However, it was in the air that the P-51 truly shined during the Battle of the Bulge. Allied pilots, now with the advantage of visibility and utilizing the Mustang's superior speed and maneuverability, launched a relentless offensive against the Luftwaffe. Dogfights became frequent and intense, with Mustangs hunting German Focke-Wulf FW-190 and Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters with fierce determination. This air superiority campaign was not just about shooting down enemy aircraft. It was also about neutralizing the Luftwaffe's ability to interfere with Allied ground operations and conduct reconnaissance missions. In a relatively short but crucial period of time, P-51 Mustang pilots, along with other Allied fighter squadrons, such as P 47 Thunderbolts and Spitfires, inflicted catastrophic losses on the Luftwaffe. It is estimated that over 500 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat and attacks on ground bases during this period. This drastic reduction in German air strength marked the beginning of the end of any hope of Nazi Germany's aerial dominance on the Western Front, allowing Allied forces to operate with much greater freedom and security, both in the air and on the ground. The P-51 Mustang, therefore, not only flew at Battle of the Bulge, it played a key role in eliminating the German air threat, paving the way for the eventual Allied victory. The air superiority achieved was not only the result of an exceptional machine, but also the courage and skill of the men who flew them, young men from diverse backgrounds, united by a common purpose. The pilots of P-51 Mustangs faced the dangers of aerial combat with admirable determination. Names such as Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, and Clarence Bud Anderson, an ace with an impressive number of victories, are just a few examples of the thousands of aviators who risked their lives in the skies over Europe. These pilots underwent rigorous training, learning the nuances of combat flying, the tactics of pursuit and evasion, and the art of operating their aircraft at the limit. In the skies of the Battle of the Bulge, they engaged in frenetic dogfights, often decided in a matter of seconds, where quick reflexes and nerves of steel meant the difference between life and death. Each mission was a calculated risk, each encounter with an enemy fighter a high-speed duel that could seal the fate of both fighters. It is important to emphasize that these pilots were not seeking personal glory, but rather fulfilling their duty to protect Allied ground troops, ensure freedom of the skies, and ultimately contribute to the defeat of the Nazi regime. Their bravery and sacrifice were critical to the success of air operations during the battle, and their tireless dedication allowed the P-51 Mustang to become a symbol of hope and resilience for soldiers on the front lines. With the restoration of Allied air dominance, largely due to the effectiveness of the P-51 Mustang and other fighters, the Battle of the Bulge took a new turn. Restored air support allowed the Allies to conduct crucial reconnaissance missions, obtaining vital information about the positioning and movements of German forces. In addition, air attacks on enemy troop concentrations, armored vehicle columns, and supply depots inflicted significant losses and slowed the German advance, undermining their offensive capability. Despite the ferocity of the ground fighting that continued until January 1945, Allied air superiority played a crucial role in containing and eventually defeating the German offensive. Without the constant threat of Allied air attack, the Wehrmacht would undoubtedly have inflicted even greater casualties, and perhaps even achieved its initial objectives. The number of German casualties, exceeding 100,000 killed, wounded, and captured, attests to the intensity of the battle and the impact of the Allied air intervention. The P-51 Mustang, therefore, was not just an observer in the skies of the Battle of the Bulge. Its presence and actions were a decisive factor in the Allied victory. It personified technological capability and human determination, transforming the sky from a potential threat to a key strategic ally. The battle proved that, in a modern conflict, control of the airspace was an indispensable component of success on the ground. The roar of the P-51 Mustang's engines echoed over the Battle of the Bulge like a cry for freedom, but its importance went beyond mere symbolism. Behind every flight, every precise strike, every risky maneuver, there was a promise that terror would not reign forever in the skies of Europe. The story of the Battle of the Bulge and the crucial role played by the P-51 Mustang remind us of the complexity of war and how technological innovations, combined with human courage, can alter the course of history. If you are interested in these stories that reveal the backstories of great conflicts and reveal the gears of history, continue exploring our channel. Here, we seek to bring to light the facts that have shaped the world we live in with the depth and analysis you expect. Until next time,